So we're looking at a 2006 Dodge Stratus 2.4 liter. Dual overhead cam, timing belt, water pump. We're going to do a valve cover gasket on this too. I guess we're leaking oil. I'm going to take the tire off, 19mm bolts. There's 5 of them. I'm going to break them loose on the ground, and then you can jack up your vehicle and take them off and take the tire off. And we have a shield. Take the shield off. A lot of these clips, like this, they try and pull the centerpiece out most of the way, if not all the way, and then this whole assembly will come out. And to put it back in, you can see how it squeezes. It squeezes together, put it in the hole, and then push the centerpiece in, and that'll lock it in place. And yes, there's a special tool for it. You can certainly look online, maybe Amazon for that. Otherwise, use a pair of pliers, side cutters, and get in there and grab it and pull them. There's quite a few of them. Get them loose, and we have some access to the crank shaft pulley and bolt. I already took it out, 19mm bolt. Maybe we'll jam a screwdriver in there and hold it in place, or a pry bar while you break it loose, or use the impact gun. We'll get started. Probably be moving some of this stuff out of the way. Looks like 10mm bolts. 10mm, 10mm. AC in the way a little bit. We'll see, we gotta move. Alright, I've got my 15mm wrench here, and I'm going to put it, there's an extension right on here. I'm going to put it on the extension, square extension. I'm going to go this way and loosen the belt. And the belt's right there. Let's see how we loosen the belt. So we can just loosen it, take this, and go that way. And we're going to pull the belt off. And for the rear belt, go back here. So 14, I think 13 or 14mm bolt there. And you can see a 1/2" square for breaker bar, 1/2" breaker bar. There probably is, 14 or 15mm bolt on the top that we may need to loosen up to get the power steering pump assembly to swing, so we can loosen up that belt as well. So as long as I'm down here, I do have an extension with a swivel, and it is a 13mm. A few turns. You can often actually we'll reach up there and grab the belt and try and pull it down. Pull the whole assembly down. Oh, nope. It's in there pretty tight, so we'll go up there and loosen up that other bolt. So here's my setup. I have a longer 3/8 ratchet and a medium-sized 13mm socket. And then I'm able to get up there. So I can get up there. I'm able to get up there and turn it a little bit. I can turn it a little bit. And that hopefully loosened it up enough. I can pull down on it. Still tight. Oh, it's got one more bolt in the back. Funny. Right there is a second nut. 13mm nut. You can loosen that and it should pull down. There we go. Pulled on it. Pull on the belt. It's coming. It's definitely loose now. So I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe just use a pry bar, or we can get in that hole and actually move it. Should be able to loosen up the bolts a little bit more and pull that belt and loosen it. And again, we need a special tool. If you've watched any of my videos, talk about the Chrysler tool, you really need to pull this crankshaft pulley off. So we'll be doing that next, I believe. So here's the kit we have. It's a really good kit, a really good tool, actually does the job. So I'm sure you can get one on Amazon. somewhere. I'll have the link for Amazon, and it'll probably take you right to the tool, at least the parts department on Amazon, and they'll deliver it right to you. So maybe you can see now how it's all mounted on there. So we'll just hold it in place right here basically, and then we'll you just turn this and it'll pull it off. It's just a friction fit. There's no notch or anything like that, and no timing marks on it. Just slides on, friction fit. So get this off. A little bit of a tight fit up there, but we got it off. May actually need to drop the engine down, which I'm sure we'll do at some time to get this out. But it came out without dropping the engine this time. There's our belt we don't need right now. Out of the way. See, no notches or anything like that. Just good spots for the tool to mount on and pull off. I believe they're 8mm bolts. A couple 8mm bolts. We'll be getting that off when we get to the timing cover. Next we're removing the alternator, 3 bolts, extension 13mm. Next, we need to remove the generator. Now they do want us to remove the generator. Now the battery, I think, is in the wheel well, so you need to be careful about not letting this touch ground somehow. Maybe we can flip it up out of the way and see if we can do that. That will probably work pretty well. It's out of our way. Now they want us to take out this bracket down here. It looks like 15mm bolts for that, and a 13mm bolt there above the tensioner. 1, 2, 3 bolts, maybe in that 13mm there, and take out this bracket for some reason. Then we'll just continue on and get those 4 bolts out and get that bracket out of there. All right, I got the bolt loose. I'll probably pull it out of here. The top one comes out. I'm not sure about the other ones, but like I said, we can probably jack up the engine and maybe squeak that out of here. Jack up the engine, give us some space. Twist it out. Again, I might need 2 hands here to do this. Jack it up and get this other bolt out. 2 bolts out. Just might need to jack it up high enough to get that bracket out. Voila. Got the bracket out. Now we have complete access, I believe, to the timing belt. It's going to be tough to see, but that's where the marks are lined up right in the middle. And I might suggest getting some white out. What I will probably do is also make my own marks up on top here where it's a little easier to see. With some white out, we'll make some marks so we can have double marks. If you can see that on there, the marks are there. Take a look at the tensioner too. Right down there, just get an idea of how it sits when it's, I guess, basically in the right spot, assuming it's never been moved. So we can try and put it right back where it is when we're done. Got a 1/4 inch ratchet square there so you can adjust the tension. I'm almost surprised they don't line up a little bit better than that, but I double checked the crankshaft mark and it is lined up. So I did again make my own marks. You can see that as well, but I made my marks on the front and the back on the pulley. I made on the pulley too, and back there. So we'll I think that's a 13mm bolt on the tensioner down there. So we'll loosen up that tensioner and loosen up the belt. Fitting my ratchet in that square hole that we talked about and turning it backwards. Or turning it clockwise, I guess. And with that, we should be able to pull the belt off. And it's not unusual for dual overhead cams for these to jump. And you can see I jacked it up, you can see my paint marks. And this one's moved forward, so when we're putting the belt on, we'll be using a wrench to turn it back into position. But so your timing belt is off. So that's basically how you do it. I wish I can get better shots for you, but there's so much stuff in the way, but we'll want to take these pulleys off. And if you can get a screwdriver in the hole and wedge it up against a bolt, then you can turn this and break it loose. You don't want to turn these too far. With the pistons on top dead center, you want to hold them as still as possible. Use the large channel locks. However, using large channel locks can gouge this, and then that gouging might cause problems on your belt, so you really don't want to do that. They also make a special tool for holding that, which I'll be using to hold them while I break these loose. And I did turn the engine over so that you can read this properly. I had marks lined up, but they were upside down, so I wanted to get that right. It says 2.4 liter front, up. It probably says something similar in the back, up, and probably 2.4 in the rear or something like that, so you don't want to mess those up apparently if they're marked differently. Because we'll now need to get that black cover off to get to the water pump. And here's the tool. A little pin on the bottom for alignment purposes. It'll be the same procedure for the one in the back. Then we get to that 8mm bolt. There's 2 or 3 of them on there, and we'll be getting those off. Against 1/4 inch ratchet should do the job for you. And the 2 pulleys, tensioner pulley and the idler pulley, we want to get those off as well. Alright, here's the tensioner. It's a 13mm. This piece needs to slide in the groove. You'll see a groove on the mount on the engine. And when you're going to be doing the tension on this, you want to get this pointy thing in the middle of the window right in here. So, I hope that helps you when you're tightening it. And this is a 17mm on this idler pulley here. You want to give these a spin. I do recommend a timing belt kit. You should be able to get a timing belt kit, I believe, on Amazon and in your local store. There'll be a link in the description to Amazon, and you'll get idler pulleys, belt, water pump, what you need to do the job. So it's less headache in the future. Alright, we're down below, and we got that 8mm bolt here. There's also 2 13mm bolts here as well. So just using my extension, get these bolts broke loose. Might need a swivel for that one. Yeah, so we'll get those 2 bolts loose and out, and we should be able to pull that rear cover right off. Look at our bolt holes right here, and here, and there, and 2 13mm bolts down here. Alright, pretty easy from here for the water pump. I believe there's 4 10mm bolts. One of the bolts holding it in place is in fact part of that bracketry, that big hole on the left. So we'll just take off the 4 bolts and take your water pump out. Get the last 2 bolts from below. We'll have a drain pan underneath there to catch any fluid that comes out. Even though we drained it, there'll probably be some coming out anyway. This particular water pump has a O-ring gasket type. Pretty nice, not much to clean off. Just maybe need to wipe that down and make sure there's no obvious bumps on there so it has a nice, clean, smooth sealing surface. So you get your water pump out. Great job, everybody. So just put your new water pump on after you clean that surface up a little bit with a rag, a little light sanding maybe. And then bolt the new water pump on. And you want to get the bolt that fits in this hole. This is just an example, but start all your bolts. Make sure you put a bolt in here and start it, and then you tighten down your 4 smaller bolts. That way you know this bolt, when it finally goes in, will actually fit and screw into the hole, because I have mounted water pumps before and tightened it all down, and this bolt would not go in. So, lesson learned. Pass it on to you. I just want to show you I got that bolt in there, just started, so I make sure that it's centered as best as I can, so that when I tighten up the 10mm bolts, I will get the bolt in there without any problems. So I'm tightening up these bolts. Got the new gasket installed on the water pump. Maybe use a little silicone RTV to make sure it stays in place in the groove. Got the new water pump on. I'll be putting the cover back on. You notice these bolts are shouldered. Just want to make a note of that for the timing cover rear. Here's an example of a type of timing kit you can get. This one does not have the water pump, but it does have the tensioner assembly. Actually mounted on the bracket, which we did not take off. And then the idler pulley right inside there. Looks good. We can open it up. So when we are adjusting the timing belt by turning this, we're going to turn it this way, and this, actually this right here is going to come up this way, I believe, and we want to line up this with this. So this piece right here will move up here and it'll line up right here, and that's when our timing belt tension is proper. As I'm using the special tool, got my 85 foot-pounds on my wrench, using a crow's foot 18mm to get that bolt in the back tight. Because it is such a tight fit, I can't get a socket back there. So that's my setup for that. I'm sure I can use a socket on the front one, but not the back. 85 foot-pounds. Okay, to clarify on the crankshaft, they want the little arrow here. Get that mark here on the tooth, but they want this arrow lining up on this trailing edge. They call it the trailing edge. So Get the arrow on the engine to line up with the trailing edge of that tooth where that mark is. I hope that makes sense. So that's your mark. You have your belt off, water pump off, you put it back together. So I know this is farther along than you think. You put it down on the crankshaft first, wrap it around the right side here, and you come around here. Of course, your mark is lined up, and this is where you do need a wrench to hold it in place. And you wrap it around the back side, and the last thing you do is pull it onto the tensioner, which is down there. And that's really it. Make sure your marks are lined up, and mine are. And then you want to turn the engine over by hand a couple times to get all the marks lined back up, and you want to double check they are lined up, because now's the time to fix it. And actually my back pulley was off a tooth, so I had to readjust it. So now it's all good, and we'll put it back together. So, and then I'll probably give you a link to the timing belt tensioner, because you want to adjust it. Let's go over here and check it out. Oh, here it is. Right here. Again, you want to use this hole here, and you want to turn it until this comes and lines up with that. I can't hold it, but you want this to end up basically in the middle of this tensioner. Hopefully I'll get a video link in there, so I'll show you how to do it, or explain it a little better. Then you just continue putting it back together. When you're putting this pulley back on, you know, put it on best you can with your hand, and then I used like a socket and a hammer and pound it down a little ways until I get the bolt started. And then I believe this bolt is 100 foot-pounds. So what I would do is use a torque wrench, set it at 100 foot-pounds, and pull the pulley on with the bolt set at 100 foot-pounds. And theoretically, when you get to the end, it should stop, and then you'll be able to torque it at 100 foot-pounds. So. Using a pry bar. Go ahead. I'm tightening up the belts. I'm gonna pry bar in here so I can pry on the pry on that. And tighten up the belt with a 13 millimeter.